Okay, so I want to welcome Representative Ed Diehl, who is running for governor, and he has agreed to join us to talk to Eastern Oregon specifically about what you can offer to Eastern Oregonians, why you think you should be our next governor. So, Representative Diehl, thank you for sitting down with me, and let's hear your pitch. Why are you the best candidate for those of us out here in Eastern Oregon?
You bet, Matt. Well, first off, it's great to be with you. And um, yeah, I'll put it this way. I grew up. I got to have a disclaimer here. I did not grow up in Oregon. My wife did. She grew up in Scio, small town just out of Albany and Staten. But I grew up in western Montana in a frontier area, small town of Plains, Montana. And I know what that's like. I can relate to it. I grew up on a cattle ranch. My dad was a logger. We were a long way from the capital. It didn't. I had no connection. It didn't feel like there was any connection to what was going on in our state government. And so I come at it, I guess, with that perspective, and I come at it also with an appreciation of natural resources. As a son of a logger and a truck driver, my grandpa was a sawmiller. My other grandpa on my mom's side was a forest ranger. And so we made our living on the land and natural resources. We had a small cattle ranch that meant I ate really well. It didn't provide a lot of income, but I ate really well. Um, so that's my perspective. And I spent a lot of my career when I first moved to Oregon. I have a background in engineering, mechanical engineering specifically, but I worked in sawmills all around this state, and a lot of my customers are gone. Uh, Frankly, that's one of the reasons I'm running. So I have that perspective, um, and I have been traveling all over the state, Matt. And I was last week. I was in Burns. Um, Later this week, I'm going to be in Hermiston and Pendleton, meeting with ranchers and business owners to really understand the challenges they have. And one thing's really clear is, they don't feel represented, and it's more than a feeling. They aren't, despite good representatives you have over there. So why I believe I'm the best guy? I understand that perspective. I grew up with it. I am committed to making sure that there is representation. I believe I'm the first governor who is candidate who is committed to having offices, permanent offices in Eastern Oregon that I will visit regularly, that will be permanently staffed. They'll be lean. They're not going to add to our budget at all, but that will be permanently staffed so people on the eastern side have a place to go. And I will be meeting them in those locations. Um, and what bothers me the most is when I go, like I went to Harney County, and you sit down with those folks and say, "Hey, we have a water issue, and there's a variety of water challenges on the eastern side, and frankly, a lot of it's induced by our own government. Uh, the community will bring all the parties together and come up with a solution. Say, hey, here's how we feel we can best solve our water challenges. They take that to the state, and the state says no. That is unbelievable. And it's an arrogance, and that arrogance of our agencies will go away. Uh, and the special interest influence, I don't have that influence. Um, and That's one of the reasons I have the support of Representative Mark Owens, Representative Todd Nash, is they know I'm an independent voice and I have that connection with rural Oregon. So sorry,
Yes. So,
that wasn't an
Representative.
elevator pitch.
No, that's great. So I think you mentioned growing up in rural Montana and feeling a long ways away from the state capital and the state government and what's happening there. I think for people in Eastern Oregon, we have 13 counties out here
Yeah.
that the people here have assessed the state as a whole, and they've assessed our ability to have political power in our own state as being very, very small and being under the thumb of the voters of Portland. So, and we've seen this play out in reality through statewide ballot measures, for instance, like Measure 114. So Measure 114 or Measure 110. Some of these ballot measures that people on the east side of the state like for the gun bill, we had a county that voted 88% against
Yeah.
that measure. And I mean, that is over. You don't get 88% for almost anything, but we had, I think it was Sherman County voted 88% against. Yet the people in Portland have such a population size compared to us out here in Eastern Oregon, they can force this policy into our communities. So what is your plan? And just so people are hearing rumblings of this IP 28, which would absolutely devastate Eastern Oregon. And I know people, the first reaction is, oh, that's crazy, that would never happen. But we're old enough to remember when people thought it was crazy that we would have legalized marijuana, or people thought it was crazy that we had these other ideas. There's nothing too crazy that can come out of the Portland metro area that can get forced into our communities. How do you plan to protect those of us in Eastern Oregon who have a radically different value set than the people in the metro area, but are at the political whim of what the people there want?
Well, first off is to recognize that you do have a radically different value set and different issues that are affecting you. And we need to restore more local control, less centralized government control. That's the number one issue that we have, that we're trying to do a one size fits all thing in a very large state with a very disparate population with different needs and interests and perspectives and history. We need to respect that. But I see it all the time in the building. So that's number one, is just respect. If Harding County has an approach they want to take, man, respect that. If we're passing laws, respect the differences in our communities. And so I very much believe in more decentralized decision making. The more local that decision making is, the better decisions we will get that reflect the interests of that community.
So you would say your solution to because Oregon is a state that is very polarized and it's very divided, and we're very divided
Yeah.
politically, also geographically, and that's one of the reasons why a movement like ours, Greater Idaho, has popped up in a state like Oregon. Is there literally is a mountain range that separates the west side of the state from the east side. So it's not just the politics or the culture or the geography. It is the geography. It's the climate. It's all of it. You believe that Oregon as a state is governable? You believe that the metro area that votes 70% liberal and wants very liberal things is compatible with Eastern Oregon, which votes 70% conservative and wants very, very different things. And your solution to that is local control. What does that look like? Or can you give us an idea of what that might look like? In something like, even like something like IP 28, which is got people really a lot of red flags out here for something like that.
Well, yeah, IP 28 is absurd. And if that does pass, there will be open defiance. You know that. Nobody's going to stop hunting or fishing or butchering animals or raising cattle. It's absurd.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard for me to answer. I guess if Portland wants to stop eating meat, they can do that. That's fine.
Right.
But if IP 28 passed, I would veto that. If that passed and it went to be put into law in statute, and I cannot fathom that it would, or I would allow each region, let each area decide. But I don't even like that idea with IP 28. It's just completely absurd. So we have to acknowledge that these differences of opinion exist. But I go further. The actions of our legislature do not even represent the mainstream Oregonian perspective. That's the problem. That's the problem. And it was on full display with the referendum. With a tax and fee bill that was rammed down everybody's throat, the governor did that, knowing that it was unpopular. She was appeasing her special interests. And I've seen that since I've been in the building in 2023, is that there's bill after bill that goes through that I know is not popular with Oregonians. So this is, it's not just this urban-rural divide. There's the fact that they're more focused on these narrow special interests than they are on the interests of the Oregon people. What I'm finding when I'm going around, I can go downtown Portland and I can talk to a manufacturer down there. They're complaining about the DEQ, same as the cattle rancher on the eastern side. I can go to uh, Portland, and they're complaining about the homeless problem, how it's driving them out of business. I went to Sheridan Fruit Company. It did drive them out of business. After 110 years in Portland, they're an institution. 3 generations work in that family. When I go to Brookings, they got the same complaints, or Grants Pass. There are problems that unite us, and our governor is extreme, and she's not representing um, our interests. That to me, that is number one. And that will change when I'm governor, number one. And the other thing is we will actively make efforts to decentralize decision making. So that decision making is left to the counties and the local school districts and local water districts. That's where those decisions should be being made.
Well, I think most of our supporters would agree with you, Representative Diehl. I mean,
Yeah.
that is part of what the Greater Idaho movement is a attempt to get back this local control. It's an attempt to
Yeah.
say for these people, us that live out here in Eastern Oregon, is that look, this is our state government no longer is working for us, and there's a state right next door to us that's really similar to us that would work for us, and we are voting, and we have voted that local control. Do you think that people in counties should have a right to choose their state governance, like what we've tried to do out here in Eastern Oregon?
Well, I'll preface, I don't want you to leave. I want you to stay. I can't imagine Oregon without the counties that have opted to leave. The other thing I'll say is you're not going to run away from this. It's coming. Change is coming to Idaho too. There's a massive influx. The demographic in Boise, the demographic in Coeur d'Alene, uh, those hubs are going to grow, and this issue is coming. If we don't fight for what's right in Oregon and take back Oregon, um, that's what I want to see us do. I look at the numbers, Matt. There's 120,000 Republicans that sat out the last gubernatorial election. There's about the same number of conservative-minded, non-affiliated voters that sat out. If those people engage, this state looks different. And if we have an extreme legislature that doesn't go along with me as a Republican governor, I will be the first governor to actively run petitions and take the issues directly to the people and use the bully pulpit to rally those and get those things that I know we have common interest on. I don't think I don't think Portland really realizes what rural rural farmers in Harney County or Umatilla are up against, because I don't think those issues are being communicated to them effectively. I will change that communication. We have a governor who's not even, I swear some of these agencies are on autopilot. She's not even paying attention. There's this huge bureaucratic mess. These decisions are being made. They're not directed by public opinion. They're directed by certain opinions inside those agencies that have become, their own institution, isolated from the people, and they're making bad decisions that are harming folks, not just in Eastern Oregon, but Southern Oregon and even downtown Portland. That will change with me as governor. And so my intent is, if we rally the people and get this vote out, we take our state back, and you will see decision making that's radically different. And that's my goal. I want these counties to come back and say, you know what? We're going to stay and fight for Oregon. That's why I'm doing this flipping thing. I, I, I'm saying that while I completely empathize. And our governor should be embarrassed that half her state wants to leave. That should be a wake-up call like nobody's business.
Well, for sure. And I think, I think that for our supporters, and this, and people that live in Oregon know this, Eastern Oregon is the most conservative part of the state by a long
Mhm.
ways. And the people in Eastern Oregon we're going to show up, and we're going to try to elect a conservative, just like we voted for the last 50 years to try to
Yeah.
elect conservatives and put them in charge of this state. So, I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us and giving us an idea of why you are our best candidate. For the majority of people out here that lean conservative and want to vote for the Republican candidate. So I want to give you last minute. I said I'd keep this to 15, 20 minutes. So I want to honor that. And I really appreciate you coming on. Last words, Representative Diehl. Again, give us your closing argument why, out of the field of multiple people running on this side of the aisle, people in Eastern Oregon should vote for you.
Yeah, let me give you an example. I've talked to the folks in the Umatilla area there along the Columbia about their water challenges. I've spoken to the folks in Cay Falls area about their water challenges in Harney County. We all have water challenges in Eastern Oregon, but each area is different and unique, and I respect that. And I also look at what role is our state government playing that is impeding our ability to have progress and to resolve these issues. And in many cases, it's our own state government that is creating the problem or standing in the way of just a common sense sound solution. That's going to change with me as governor because I will be revamping each one of these agencies with new leadership and reset their priorities. And like I said, I will be the first governor to have offices on the eastern side to make sure that your voice is being heard and represented. I have no problem pushing back on the legislature. I will take votes directly to the people. I've already demonstrated that when I had the honor of leading the volunteer effort for the referendum. We're bringing another one, by the way, to refer the federal disconnect that took away accelerated depreciation rates for Oregon businesses. Um, and again, my perspective is a rural frontier perspective. That's how I grew up. That independent entrepreneur pioneer spirit is in me. That's part of our Oregon heritage, and I want to make sure that that is respected in the governor's office.
Awesome. Well, Representative Diehl, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. And good luck. And I know that you've been out here in Eastern Oregon. You're planning on coming back. So hopefully we will see you out here at some of your events.
Where are you based?
So I'm in Powell Butte, but we have supporters all over.
Okay.
Our vice president's in John Day, and we have county captains all over. So we have supporters all over Eastern Oregon. I'm in Powell Butte. I was not born, but I was born in Southern Oregon, but raised in Bend.
Yeah.
Back when Bend was a rural town, that has changed. But but I do think and we'll wrap it up, and we kind of have wrapped it up already. But I do think it's important. I think there's a lot of people in our state that have never experienced Eastern Oregon, or maybe, some of them have come over and, gone to the Wowers or something, but they don't understand how vast it is, how different the lifestyle is here, what it's like to be a rural person in Eastern Oregon. And it's different even than a rural person in Western Oregon. A Western Oregon county that's conservative and rural will still have 50,000 people. And we have counties that have 3,000 people.
Right.
It's just different. And we have counties that are bigger than entire states. So I do think it matters that people understand what it is to live over here. That we haven't had a governor like that in I'm not sure if ever, but a very long while.
Well, we haven't, and we desperately need it. I've met people in Portland who've never been. I don't think they've ever been south of Wilsonville. Their whole perspective of Oregon is Portland centric, and that's a problem. There's been a lot of influx of voters like that. The other thing I probably didn't emphasize it enough here is, we've turned. We're a rich state in natural resources. And we have we've locked them up in the name of the climate or in the name of the environment. And that has robbed our rural communities of good paying jobs. It has turned our timberlands from an asset into a liability. It is devastating. Part of making Eastern Oregon relevant is to unleash those natural resources. And one example is, we got the timberlands, yes, and we got to acknowledge that a big chunk of Eastern Oregon is owned by the federal government. That's its own
Mhm.
challenge.
Mhm.
But we have mining resources, mineral resources like lithium. Um, you go and look at what's going on the border, in the Nevada border. We have Nevada in the last year, I think, has produced 900 jobs. It's a boom. And then you
Mhm.
cross the Oregon border, nothing's going on. You go, why aren't we taking advantage of this resource? Well, we've locked it up in the name of the environment and climate. Well, that means we're still using lithium, so we're getting it from foreign adversaries. There's other rare earth minerals. We go to South Africa and we use slave labor and get it from countries that have no environmental standards. How are
Wow.
we helping the environment? We're not. If we unleash these natural resources, we we make Eastern Oregon way more, I guess, relevant uh, to people in Portland and other areas because we've turned a lot of these rural counties, they're now debtor counties. They expect they receive more in state benefits than they're paying
Mhm.
out. If we had 900 good paying jobs on a mine in Harney County, that flips it. That flips that whole narrative. So I want to see these natural resources really used in a sustainable and common sense, practical way, and that brings a lot of wealth to Eastern Oregon and independence.
Wow.
Um,
And I think too, Representative Deal, just on a
yeah,
side note, I think that one of the things that people don't understand is that there's an imbalance between the ability of an urban area to exert influence over a rural area that doesn't exist the other direction. So when
hmm
you have, so what that means is like your rural areas need more protection than your urban areas do because no matter
yeah,
what, every single person in Harney County could decide that they have this policy they think Portland should implement. They would never be able to implement that policy in Portland because they just don't have the numbers. But if even 50% of people in Multnomah County decide that they have a policy Eastern Oregon, they think Eastern Oregon should implement, they can force that on us. There's more people, there's twice as many people in Multnomah County as there is in all of
yeah,
Eastern Oregon. So that requires a different set of, you cannot treat our rural areas like you treat our urban areas because there's an imbalance of power to begin with. And it requires that governors and legislatures understand that you have to you have to have special protections for rural areas
right.
because we just don't have the political numbers to stop other people from imposing their will on us. And again, I think that goes back to know people that have grown up in rural areas or people that know rural areas. They understand that in a way that somebody that lives in the city does not. That
Yeah.
somebody who lives in a city has never had somebody from Sherman County force their way on their city, but people in Sherman County have had lots of things forced on them by the people in the city, and so it matters, and it's
It,
something that
it
needs to be addressed by a governor.
it absolutely matters. What I would love to do um, as your next governor is sit down with you and your group and figure out what changes can we implement that offer that protection beyond this particular governor cycle. Um, and that might be constitutional changes. One of the beauties of how our federal government was set up is they recognize that. So there's a balance between the House, which is
Yep.
populist, and the Senate. I would love to say, hey, why don't we go to a Senate that's representative by county? I don't know if we could pull that off, but
Well,
that
unfortunately,
would
there's a
change
Supreme
things a
Court
lot,
case
wouldn't
that's
it?
working against us on that.
Yeah,
We would
yeah, I
love
know.
that. I mean, that used to be the way it
Yeah,
was, and it afforded extra protections to these rural areas.
yeah.
And then the Supreme Court overturned that. But I think that's something that absolutely is needed and desired by those of us out here in rural places.
Well, I'd love to brainstorm with you and figure out how to make those kinds of changes so this risk goes away, so that representation is there long after I'm governor. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Thank
Again,
you, Matt.
Representative Deal, thank you for joining us. I appreciate the conversation, and we will see you around Eastern Oregon.
You bet. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Thank you.